The evaluation chamber's blue light cast harsh shadows across Veila's iridescent skin as three elders circled her naked form. Their compound eyes reflected no emotion, only clinical assessment as they studied the readouts from the scanning orbs hovering around her body. Subject 7429 Veila shows critical deficiency in genetic profile, announced Elder Thaxis, her voice a mechanical cadence that betrayed nothing of the sentence she was delivering. Reproductive compatibility rating, 0. Genetic viability for continuation, null. Veila kept her posture rigid despite the trembling in her secondary limbs. To show weakness would only confirm their assessment. The yearly continuation trials had always filled her with dread, but this final verdict, delivered on her 30th cycle, meant permanent exile. I request reassessment, Veila said, her voice steady despite knowing the futility. My contributions to the agricultural division have exceeded. Productivity in non-essential sectors does not compensate for reproductive failure, Elder Morzik interrupted, his dorsal spines flaring with impatience. The Seldorian collective requires genetic perfection. Your anomalies cannot be permitted in our lineage. The third elder, Paxil, didn't even look at Veila as she stamped the official designation onto a tablet. Preparations for your removal to the outer territories will commence immediately. Your dwelling and possessions revert to the collective. No further discussion. No appeal. Within 3 hours, Veila found herself at the edge of New Seldoria's protective dome, with only a small pack of survival tools and 7 days of nutrient paste. The processing officer, once her neighbor, had avoided looking at her twisted left secondary arm, the physical manifestation of her defect and the likely cause of her reproductive incompatibility. The shuttle will not return, he said flatly. Survival beyond this point is not anticipated, but not forbidden. The words were the closest thing to kindness in the Seldorian protocol, acknowledging that while they expected her to die, they weren't explicitly killing her. As the airlock sealed behind her, Veila took her first unfiltered breath of Eremos, 9, the harsh mining planet her people had partially colonized 3 generations ago. The air was thin but breathable, the twin suns setting behind distant purple mountains. The terraforming had taken hold in patches, creating islands of tolerable environment amid the planet's natural toxicity. She walked until the dome of New Seldoria was a mere shimmer on the horizon, following the path previous defectives had worn into the rusty soil. Few survived more than a season. Some took their own lives rather than face the slow degradation of exile. The Seldorians considered this efficient, defective members removing themselves from consuming resources. Veila had no such plans. The anger burning within her provided warmth against the dropping temperature as night fell. She found shelter in a small cave formed by fallen mining equipment, abandoned during the initial colonization efforts. As she huddled against the cold, Veila's secondary arms wrapped protectively around her torso, an instinctive gesture her kind used when carrying young. Her body knew what to do, even if the elders had deemed it incapable. The bitter irony made her thoracic cavity constrict with something Seldorians rarely acknowledged, grief. In the distance, something howled, one of the native predators adapted to the thin atmosphere. Veila checked her perimeter scanner. The reading showed the creature was moving away, not toward her position. She removed a small hologram from her pack, contraband she'd hidden from the processing officers. It displayed her clutch siblings, 5 young Seldorians she'd helped raise after their biological mother had died in a mining accident. They weren't hers by birth, but she had cared for them, taught them, protected them until they reached independence. The elders hadn't counted that as motherhood. Reproductive capability isn't measured solely by eggs and genetic codes, she whispered to the darkness, words of rebellion no Seldorian would speak within the dome. The hologram flickered as its power cell weakened. Tomorrow she would need to find water, set up more permanent shelter, and identify edible native plants to supplement her meager rations. Her survival training, mandatory for all Seldorians in case of dome failure, would keep her alive for now. As Veila drifted into the shallow sleep of her species, her final conscious thought was not of fear or resignation, but of a curious freedom. For the first time in her life, no one was measuring her worth against an impossible standard. Whatever she became now in this harsh wilderness would be of her own making. Beyond the cave entrance, the alien landscape shimmered under 3 moons. Somewhere in the night, a meteorite streaked across the sky, a human research vessel entering the atmosphere, though Veila had no way of knowing that this fiery trail marked the arrival of her future. Dr. Jallen Rivera wiped sweat from his brow as Eremos 9's larger sun beat down on his environmental suit. 3 weeks into Earth's humanitarian mission to assess the struggling colony world, and he still wasn't accustomed to the planet's punishing diurnal cycle, freezing nights followed by scorching days. Bioskin detecting elevated nitrogen compounds in this sector, he reported into his comm unit. Consistent with unofficial accounts of Seldorian exiles attempting agriculture beyond the dome. Copy that, responded Commander Elliot from the base camp 5 kilometers away. Any signs of survivors? Jallen consulted his handheld scanner. Nothing yet, but these readings suggest recent activity. He paused, adjusting the sensitivity. Wait, I'm getting a life sign. Faint, but definitely Seldorian. Following the signal, Jallen navigated through a field of rust-colored vegetation, native plants slowly reclaiming an abandoned mining site. The biosignature led him to a small shelter ingeniously constructed from salvaged equipment and native materials. Outside lay several neat rows of cultivated soil where unfamiliar plants were beginning to sprout. Hello, he called out, activating his translator module. I'm Dr. Jallen Rivera from Earth's Interplanetary Aid Commission. I mean no harm. A shadow moved within the shelter. Then, with startling swiftness, a figure emerged, tall, with iridescent blue-green skin that seemed to absorb and reflect sunlight simultaneously. The Seldorian was clearly female, with the characteristic 4 arms of her species, though Jallen immediately noticed one secondary arm appeared slightly malformed. She held a makeshift spear, her compound eyes narrowed in suspicion. Human, she stated, not lowering her weapon. Why have you sought an exile? I didn't specifically seek you, Jallen explained, slowly removing his helmet to show his face, a gesture of trust. We're documenting ecological changes and surveying for any inhabitants outside the main colony. The Seldorian's posture stiffened. To report back to New Seldoria. I will not return to face further humiliation. No, Jallen shook his head. Earth has no obligation to report exiles to the Seldorian authorities. Our mission is humanitarian, to help everyone on this planet. He noticed how she swayed slightly, how the vivid colors of her skin had dulled along her thorax, signs of malnutrition he recognized from xenobiology texts. Despite her defensive posture, she was clearly weakened. My name is Jallen. May I know yours? A moment of hesitation. Veila. I was, Agricultural Specialist 7429 Veila. You appear dehydrated, Veila, he said gently. I have medical supplies and water. Will you accept assistance? Her compound eyes studied him intently, multifaceted surfaces reflecting his image back in dozens of tiny duplicates. Seldorians were notoriously private about their physiological needs, considering displays of weakness deeply shameful. Why would you help one deemed worthless by her own kind? Her voice carried an edge of bitterness. Jallen set down his pack and slowly extracted a water purifier and nutrient supplements. Where I come from, no one is worthless. And those gardens, he gestured to her careful plantings, suggest you're quite resourceful. Something shifted in her posture. The spear lowered slightly. The soil here requires amendment to support Seldorian crops. I've been experimenting with native bacterial infusion. There was a hint of pride in her voice, perhaps the first positive emotion she'd expressed since her exile. Impressive. I'd be interested to hear more about your techniques. Jallen placed the supplies on the ground between them, then stepped back. These are yours, regardless of whether you want to talk to me. Veila's secondary arms trembled almost imperceptibly as she approached the offerings. The gesture wasn't lost on Jallen. Seldorians rarely revealed physical weakness. She must be in worse condition than she appeared. As she reached for the water, her legs suddenly buckled. Jallen moved forward instinctively, catching her before she hit the ground. The contact, human hand supporting alien form, seemed to freeze time for a moment. Her exoskeleton felt warm and surprisingly soft beneath his fingers. You're severely dehydrated, he said, helping her to sit. Your electrolyte balance is critical. Instead of pulling away as he expected, Veila remained in his supportive grasp, her primary arms clutching his forearms. Up close, he could see fine cracks in her exoskeleton, early signs of serious malnutrition. I miscalculated, she admitted with obvious difficulty. The second sun's radiation affected my crops. The harvest failed. Jallen activated his medical scanner, running it over her thorax. When did you last consume adequate nutrition? 8 planetary cycles ago. Nearly 2 Earth weeks. Jallen felt a surge of admiration for her tenacity mixed with professional concern. I need to administer emergency nutrients. It will require direct injection into your circulatory node. Will you permit this? The request was intimate by Seldorian standards, asking to breach her exoskeleton with medical tools. Among her people, such vulnerability was reserved only for medical elders. Veila's compound eyes met his human ones. You have knowledge of Seldorian physiology. I'm a xenobiologist. It's my specialty. He prepared the nutrient solution, his movements deliberate and transparent so she could see exactly what he was doing. After a long moment, Veila tilted her neck, exposing the pulsing blue circulatory node beneath her jaw, an extraordinary gesture of trust. As Jallen administered the treatment, the unspoken question hung between them: what would happen to her now? The human base has adequate supplies, he said, answering her unasked question. And we could use someone with agricultural expertise. If you want. Veila's secondary arms wrapped around herself, that protective gesture again. But this time, perhaps, with a flicker of hope. What would be required of me, she asked. Just your knowledge. Your choice to share it. Nothing more. As the twin suns began their descent, casting long shadows across the rusty landscape, Jallen helped Veila gather her few possessions. Neither could know that this simple act of human compassion had just changed both their destinies irrevocably. The human research station gleamed like a silver pendant against Eremos 9's rusty landscape, its transparent dome a stark contrast to the oppressive, opaque barrier of New Seldoria. For Veila, the 3 weeks since Jallen had brought her here had been a continuous study in contradictions. The molecular structure of your fertilizer compound is fascinating, Dr. Abani Okafor, the station's agronomist, said as she examined Veila's notes. Combining native fungi with Seldorian enzymes, brilliant adaptation. Veila's crest fluttered with the unfamiliar sensation of pride. Among her people, work was duty, not accomplishment. Praise was inefficient. Dr. Rivera believed you would be an asset to our team, Abani continued, smiling warmly. He was right. Across the laboratory, Jallen looked up from his microscope, catching Veila's gaze. 3 weeks of proper nutrition had restored her exoskeleton's vibrant colors, the blue-green iridescence now shimmering with health. The sight stirred something in him that went beyond professional satisfaction. Later that evening, Veila sat alone in the observation dome, watching Eremos 9's 3 moons rise over the horizon. The human quarters they'd adapted for her physiology were comfortable, but she often sought this solitary viewpoint after the day's activities. May I join you? Jallen's voice came from behind her. Veila's antennae twitched in acknowledgement. Of course. He sat beside her on the bench designed to accommodate various physiologies. The botanical team is implementing your fungal matrix tomorrow. Everyone's excited to see the results. It is strange, Veila said after a moment. Among Seldorians, I was defective. Here, I am valued for my mind. Jallen studied her profile, the elegant angles of her face illuminated by moonlight. Your worth was never in question, Veila. Only their ability to see it. She turned to him, compound eyes reflecting the stars. Humans are peculiar. You celebrate individual variation rather than collective uniformity. Not always, Jallen admitted. We have our own troubled history with difference. But we've learned that diversity strengthens us. Veila's secondary arms moved in a gesture he'd come to recognize as contemplative. The elders would say such thinking leads to inefficiency. And yet here you are, creating solutions the collective never imagined. A comfortable silence fell between them. Proximity to him caused an unusual warmth in her thoracic cavity, a physiological response her people would consider inappropriate, even dangerous. Jallen, she said finally, using his first name for the first time. May I ask something personal? Of course. Why did you become a xenobiologist? Most humans I've observed seem more comfortable among their own kind. His smile carried a hint of sadness. Maybe because I never quite fit among my own kind either. On Earth, I was always the odd one, too interested in alien cultures, too questioning of human norms. He looked down at his hands. My parents wanted me to follow the family tradition of medicine on Earth. When I chose xenobiology instead, let's say they have their own version of exile. The revelation that he too understood rejection shifted something fundamental in Veila's perception. Without conscious thought, her primary hand moved to cover his, her first voluntary touch. The contact sent an electric current through both of them. Seldorians rarely touched outside necessity. The sensation of his warm skin against her sensitive palm was overwhelming. "I'm sorry," she started to withdraw, but Jallen gently turned his hand to clasp hers. "Don't be," he said softly. That night marked a turning point. Over the following days, Veila began joining crew gatherings rather than retreating to solitude. She observed human interactions with fascination, their casual touches, their laughter, their open displays of emotion that would be considered vulgar weakness in Seldorian society. Most fascinating was Jallen, his patience when explaining human concepts, his genuine interest in her perspective, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She found herself seeking his company beyond their research collaboration, learning the subtle language of human connection. One evening, as they worked late calibrating soil samples, a storm rolled across the horizon. The laboratory's transparent ceiling revealed spectacular lightning illuminating the alien clouds. "It's beautiful," Jallen murmured, standing close beside her. "Yes," Veila agreed, though she was looking at him rather than the storm. "Among my people, aesthetic appreciation is considered superfluous." "What about this?" Jallen's hand rose slowly, giving her time to retreat, before gently tracing the pattern of iridescent markings along her forearm. "Is this superfluous?" The touch sent cascades of sensation through her nervous system. "That is, significantly non-superfluous," she managed, her voice dropping to a register she'd never used before. Jallen's smile deepened as he stepped closer. "There's something I've wanted to ask. In human culture, when two people feel a connection, there's a way we express it physically. I've been researching whether Seldorian physiology might be compatible with the human practice of kissing," Veila finished for him. "I have also been researching this topic." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "You have?" "Extensively." Her secondary arms moved with uncharacteristic shyness. "Though I lack practical experience." The admission hung between them like an invitation. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the desire in his eyes. "Would you like to conduct an experiment?" he asked, his voice husky. "For scientific purposes," she agreed, her antennae quivering. His hands rose to gently cup her face, careful of the sensitive structures. "Tell me if anything feels uncomfortable." "I will." When his lips met the sensitive surface just above her mandibles, the Seldorian equivalent of a mouth, Veila understood why her people forbidden such intimate contact. The sensation was overwhelming, sending waves of pleasure through neural pathways she never knew existed. Her forearms instinctively wrapped around him, drawing him closer as the storm raged outside. What began as an experiment transformed into a profound communion of two beings who had found acceptance in each other's differences. In the sacred space between their bodies, exile and isolation dissolved, replaced by the beginning of something neither had dared imagine. Later, as they lay entwined on the observation deck's lounge, Veila's head resting against Jallen's chest, she listened to the unfamiliar rhythm of his single heart. "This changes everything," she whispered. His fingers traced the patterns on her shoulder. "Are you afraid?" "Yes," she admitted. But not enough to stop. Outside, the storm gradually cleared, revealing the stars. Inside, two beings from different worlds had found a new constellation to navigate by, one charted not by genetics or tradition, but by the mysterious cartography of the heart. The survey rover crested a ridge overlooking one of Eremos 9's rare water sources, a mineral-rich lake bordered by thriving patches of native vegetation. Jallen slowed the vehicle, checking the atmospheric readings on the dashboard. "Perfect location for the next monitoring station," he noted, recording the coordinates. "The water table here is remarkably stable despite the seasonal changes." Beside him, Veila adjusted the settings on her environmental scanner. 2 months into their relationship, they had developed a comfortable professional rhythm alongside their deepening personal connection. Commander Elliot had officially designated Veila as Jallen's research partner, recognizing their complementary expertise. "I'm detecting unusual organic compounds approximately 300 meters north," Veila reported, her antennae quivering with interest. "Similar to Seldorian biochemistry, but with anomalous variations." They navigated the rover carefully around the lake's edge. As they approached the source of the readings, Veila suddenly stiffened, her compound eyes widening. "Stop the vehicle," she commanded, her voice tight. Before Jallen could fully break, Veila had already opened her door, leaping out with the supernatural agility of her species. He watched in confusion as she sprinted toward a cluster of rocks, dropping to her knees beside what appeared to be a bundle of rags. When he reached her side, Jallen froze in astonishment. Cradled in Veila's forearms was a small creature, clearly a juvenile with Seldorian features but strikingly different. Its exoskeleton displayed patches of crimson among the typical blue-green, and its eyes were not compound but large, dark orbs that blinked up at them fearfully. A hybrid, Veila whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Half Seldorian, half Carvax. Jallen crouched beside them, medical scanner already in hand. Severely dehydrated and malnourished. Heart rate erratic. He looked up at Veila. How is this possible? I thought Seldorians didn't interbreed. Veila finished. It is forbidden. Any such offspring are. She couldn't complete the sentence, but Jallen understood. Abandoned, like Veila herself had been. The child made a soft clicking sound, weakly reaching one small hand toward Veila's face. With careful precision, Veila shifted the child to her secondary arms while her primary hands prepared the emergency hydration pack from their medical kit. You know how to care for Seldorian young? Jallen asked, surprised. Veila nodded, efficiently administering nutrients through the child's circulatory node. I raised my clutch siblings after our maternal elder died. A bitter edge entered her voice. Another contribution deemed irrelevant during my evaluation. As the emergency treatment took effect, the hybrid child's color improved slightly. Jallen estimated it to be approximately 3 Earth years old, barely more than an infant by Seldorian standards. We need to get back to the station, he said, already packing their equipment. Dr. Navarro will know how to treat the xenobiological complications. Veila didn't move, her gaze fixed on the abandoned child. They did this deliberately, she said, her voice hollow. Left it, her, at the edge of habitable territory. Far enough to claim no direct responsibility for her death, but with no chance of survival. Jallen knelt beside them again, one hand gently touching the child's forehead while the other rested on Veila's shoulder. She survived this long. That shows extraordinary resilience. Like someone else I know, he added softly. The return journey to the research station was tense, with Veila monitoring the child's vital signs while Jallen drove at maximum safe speed. Through the rover's communication system, they briefed Dr. Navarro, the station's chief medical officer, who prepared the xenobiology lab for their arrival. Hours later, Veila stood rigidly outside the medical bay, her posture betraying the emotional turmoil she still struggled to express. Jallen waited with her, their hands intertwined in silent support. Dr. Navarro finally emerged, her dark hair escaping from its hasty ponytail. She's stable, she reported. The genetic combination is fascinating, I've never seen anything like it. The Carvax DNA has actually complemented some typical Seldorian weaknesses. Will she survive? Veila asked, her normally melodic voice strained. With proper care, yes. But. Dr. Navarro hesitated. Protocol requires that we notify both parent species when we encounter abandoned young. Veila's exoskeleton darkened with emotion. The Seldorians will demand her termination. Hybrids are considered genetic pollution. And the Carvax mining colony on the southern continent has already denied any connection, Jallen added grimly. I received their response while you were in surgery. Commander Elliot joined them, her expression troubled. This creates a diplomatic situation. Our mission parameters require cooperation with local governments. She is not a diplomatic situation, Veila said, her voice suddenly fierce. She is a child. The commander's gaze softened. I understand your position, Veila. But we need to follow procedures. May I see her? Veila asked, ignoring the implicit rebuke. Inside the medical pod, the hybrid child lay sleeping, her small chest rising and falling steadily. Various tubes and monitors connected to her delicate form, the equipment modified to accommodate her unique physiology. Veila approached slowly, her secondary arms making involuntary nurturing gestures. When she placed one hand gently on the pod, the child's eyes fluttered open, those extraordinary dark orbs focusing immediately on Veila's face. A small hand pressed against the transparent barrier, directly opposite Veila's. She's imprinting, Dr. Navarro observed with clinical interest. Seldorian young form attachments quickly after hatching. She recognizes a maternal figure, Jallen said softly, watching the intense connection forming between them. That night, Veila refused to leave the medical bay, maintaining a silent vigil beside the child's pod. Jallen brought her nutrition supplements and stayed nearby, working on his reports while offering quiet support. Shortly before dawn, he awoke from a light doze to find Veila singing softly, an ancient Seldorian hatching song rarely heard by outsiders. The child had wrapped one small hand around Veila's finger through the medical pod's access port. She needs a name, Veila said without looking up. Jallen moved to stand beside her, placing his arm gently around her shoulders. What will you call her? Thera, Veila replied. In ancient Seldorian, it means, unexpected gift. 3 days later, Commander Elliot summoned them to her office. Her expression was grave as she activated the communication screen. I've received official responses regarding the hybrid child, she reported. New Seldoria demands her immediate transfer to their biocontainment facility for processing. The Carvax colony claims no responsibility and suggests we dispose of the genetic anomaly however we see fit. Veila's posture became dangerously still, a Seldorian sign of extreme emotional distress. Jallen moved closer to her, their shoulders touching in silent solidarity. And what does Earth say? He asked carefully. Commander Elliot's expression softened slightly. Officially, we're instructed to respect local cultural protocols while maintaining humanitarian standards. A heavy silence filled the room. I won't let them take her, Veila said finally, her voice vibrating with intensity. The commander studied them both for a long moment. The transport shuttle returns to Earth next week. Medical necessity might require certain patients to be evacuated for specialized treatment. She tapped a sequence on her console, and the official communications disappeared. I didn't hear what you just said, Dr. Rivera, Specialist Veila. And I won't hear anything else about this matter for the next 7 days. As they left the office, Jallen took Veila's hand. We have 1 week to decide our future. Veila's compound eyes reflected the light differently than he'd ever seen, with tears, a physiological response Seldorians supposedly lacked. My future is with Thera, she said with certainty. I cannot allow what happened to me to happen to her. Jallen's fingers tightened around hers. Our future, he corrected gently. With Thera. That night, as they made love in the privacy of their quarters, their union carried new urgency and tenderness, a pledge being sealed between them as they prepared to defy 2 worlds for the sake of a child who belonged to neither. Dawn broke over Eremos, 9 for the last time, at least, the last time Veila would witness it from this particular vantage point. She stood at the observation dome, Thera cradled against her thorax in a modified carrying sling. The child's breathing had stabilized over the past week, her unique hybrid physiology proving more resilient than anyone had anticipated. The secondary effects of the sedatives have cleared from her system, Dr. Navarro said, completing her final examination. She's officially cleared for transport. Thank you, Veila replied, her gaze still fixed on the alien landscape that had been first her prison, then her salvation. For everything. The doctor's hand briefly touched Veila's shoulder, a human gesture of connection she'd come to appreciate. You're giving her a chance no one else would. As a doctor, I can't officially condone circumventing protocols, but... She smiled slightly, as a mother myself, I'd do exactly what you're doing. Behind them, the research station hummed with the activity of shift change, a deliberate diversion orchestrated by Commander Elliot to mask their departure. Most of the crew remained unaware of the plan, giving them plausible deniability when the inevitable diplomatic protests arrived from New Seldoria. Jallen appeared at the doorway, his expression a mixture of tension and excitement. The shuttle pilot has completed the pre-flight checks. We need to move now. They had precisely 18 minutes to board the supply shuttle before the official passenger manifest would be transmitted to Earth headquarters. Once aboard, they would be registered as special medical transport, technically accurate regarding Thera, though deliberately vague about their final destination. As they moved through the corridors, several crew members nodded in silent support. Word had spread despite their caution, humans were remarkably efficient at transmitting information through unspoken channels. Veila had learned that not all human communication required words. At the airlock, Commander Elliot waited for them, her uniform impeccable as always. Dr. Rivera, your research transfer to the xenobiology outpost on Europa has been processed. Your credentials will be recognized upon arrival. She turned to Veila, her expression softening. Specialist Veila, as a scientific consultant of significant value, Earth has granted you provisional residency status. She handed them a data crystal. This contains everything you'll need: identification, credentials, and certain, unofficial routes that might prove useful. Commander, Jallen began. No time for lengthy farewells, Elliot interrupted, though her eyes conveyed more than her words. The official version is that you're continuing your research into hybrid agricultural techniques for extreme environments. Anything beyond that is not in my reports. As they prepared to board, Veila turned to face the commander. With formal precision, she extended her primary right arm in the traditional Seldorian gesture of deepest respect, one usually reserved only for elders. May your path be fertile, she said in formal Seldorian, the traditional blessing carrying new meaning in this context. Commander Elliot returned the gesture with surprising accuracy. And may yours bring unexpected growth. The shuttle journey passed in tense silence. Only when they reached the orbital transfer station did Jallen finally exhale fully, drawing Veila and Thera into a gentle embrace. We made it through the first step, he said, his voice rough with emotion. The transport to Europa leaves in 6 hours. Veila's secondary arms adjusted Thera's carrying sling as the child slept peacefully. What will happen when New Seldoria discovers our departure? By then, we'll be under Europa Station's jurisdiction. The oceanic research base there is technically international territory. He smiled slightly. And they're always in need of xenobiologists and agricultural specialists willing to work in extreme conditions. In the station's small observation lounge, they watched as Eremos 9 slowly rotated below them, the rusty terrain and the distinctive dome of New Seldoria now distant enough to seem almost insignificant. I never imagined leaving, Veila admitted. Even in exile, it was still home. Jallen's fingers intertwined with hers. Home isn't always where we begin. No, she agreed, looking down at Thera's sleeping form. Sometimes it's where we are found. The alarm on Jallen's communicator chimed softly. Time to board the Europa transport. As they prepared to leave, a message flashed across the public announcement system: attention. Representatives from New Seldoria requesting immediate dock access. All personnel, prepare for diplomatic envoy. Jallen tensed. They've moved faster than expected. Veila straightened to her full height, her exoskeleton shimmering with determination. Then we move faster still. They navigated the station's corridors with controlled urgency, Thera now awake and alert in her carrier. At the transport bay, a station officer checked their credentials with careful deliberation. Xenobiology transfer to Europa, she noted, glancing at Thera with barely concealed curiosity. Special medical transport clearance confirmed. Behind them, they could hear the distinctive clicking dialect of Seldorian officials. Veila's antennae twitched with recognition. Elder Paxil had come personally. Final boarding call for Europa Transit, announced the system. Airlock seal in 3 minutes. The officer handed back their credentials. You'd better hurry, she said meaningfully. Sometimes the airlock seal early for environmental calibration. They moved quickly down the boarding tunnel. Just as they reached the transport vessel's entrance, a commanding voice echoed behind them. Defective 7429 Veila. Elder Paxil's formal tones carried the weight of Seldorian authority. You have violated protocol by removing contaminated genetic material from approved containment. Veila turned slowly, positioning herself between the Elder and Thera. Jallen stood firmly at her side. She is not contaminated, Veila replied, her voice carrying the melodic resonance of formal Seldorian speech. She is evolved. As am I. Elder Paxil's compound eyes reflected cold calculation. Return the aberration and your own punishment will be minimized. Her name is Thera, Veila stated. And she is my daughter, not by failed genetic protocols, but by choice. A concept your perfect society has forgotten. At that moment, Thera reached one small hand toward Veila's face, making the distinctive clicking sound that had become her way of expressing contentment. The gesture, so natural, so clearly one of attachment, seemed to momentarily confuse the Elder. The vessel is prepared for departure, announced a crew member from the transport ship. Please board immediately. Elder Paxil stepped forward. The Seldorian collective demands. The Seldorian collective has no jurisdiction here, interrupted a new voice. Commander Elliot strode purposefully down the corridor, her uniform now displaying the full insignia of her Earth authority. This is an international transit zone, and these individuals are under Earth protection. She positioned herself between the elder and the small family. Any interference with their passage will constitute a diplomatic incident that I'm certain the collective would prefer to avoid, given the precarious state of your mining rights on Eremos. 9. A tense silence stretched between them. This defiance will be recorded, Elder Paxil finally stated. As will your treatment of your own people, Commander Elliot countered. Now, if you'll excuse us, this transport has a schedule to maintain. Inside the ship, Veila held Thera close as they secured themselves for departure. The child's unique eyes, neither fully Seldorian nor Carvax, watched the proceedings with remarkable awareness. She understands more than we realize, Jallen observed, gently stroking the child's crimson-patterned head. Yes, Veila agreed. She knows she is wanted. The transport vessel disengaged from the station with a gentle shudder. Through the viewport, they watched as Eremos. 9 diminished, becoming merely another point of light among the stars. 6 months later, the research habitat on Europa's ice-covered ocean had become their home. Their living quarters, designed for Jallen's human needs but modified for Seldorian physiology, overlooked the vast, mysterious depths of the alien see-through transparent flooring. Veila sat on the specially designed meditation platform, all 4 arms engaged in different tasks, her primary right hand typing research notes while her left held a specimen container. Her secondary arm supported Thera as the child practiced forming complex sound patterns, her unique vocal structures allowing her to blend both Seldorian and human speech with remarkable facility. Mama, Thera clicked, the human word transmuted through Seldorian vocal structures into something uniquely hers. Jallen. Veila's antennae quivered with emotion still new to her, joy unrestrained by Seldorian propriety. Yes, little one. Your family. The habitat door slid open as Jallen returned from the research lab, his face alight with excitement. The hybridized algae cultures are thriving. Your enzymatic stabilizers were the key, they're growing at triple the expected rate. He knelt beside them, and Thera immediately reached for him with her upper arms, a gesture mirroring Veila's own manner of embrace. The sight still filled Veila with wonder. This child, rejected by 2 worlds, now flourished between them, taking what was best from each heritage. The Europa Council has approved our request, Jallen said, his voice softening. Thera's legal status as our daughter is now officially recognized under international space law. Veila's compound eyes reflected the soft blue lighting of their home. So the collective can never claim her. Never, Jallen confirmed, taking Veila's primary hand in his. And there's more. 3 more hybrid children have been identified on outlying colonies. The Council wants us to establish a formal sanctuary program. Veila's exoskeleton shimmered with emotion. Others like Thera. Like me. Like us, Jallen corrected gently. Different pieces creating something stronger together. That night, after Thera had fallen asleep in her adaptation pod, Veila and Jallen stood on the observation deck, watching Europa's ice crust glow under Jupiter's reflected light. Their bodies intertwined in the intimate language they had created together, neither fully human nor Seldorian, but something gloriously, uniquely their own. I was declared defective because I could not create life through approved methods, Veila murmured against his shoulder. Now I am mother to a child no one wanted, and soon perhaps to many more. Jallen's fingers traced the iridescent patterns along her spine, a touch that still sent cascades of pleasure through her nervous system. The Seldorians measured your worth by what your body could produce. They never understood that motherhood exists in the heart. Veila turned in his arms, her compound eyes reflecting the stars. Among my people, we have no word for what I feel for Thera, or for you. The concept of love as humans understand it is considered a weakness, a primitive evolutionary remnant. And now? Jallen asked softly. Now I understand it is the greatest strength in the universe. Her primary hands framed his face while her secondary arms embraced his waist. It builds what genetics cannot. Their kiss deepened, bodies melding together in what had once been forbidden intimacy but was now their private celebration of defiance against biological determinism. Veila had learned that human mating carried emotional significance far beyond reproduction, a sacred communion she now cherished. Later, as they lay entwined in their sleeping chamber, skin against exoskeleton in perfect harmony, Jallen traced the small bioluminescent spots that had begun to appear along Veila's secondary arms, a physiological change Dr. Navarro had identified as a response to her new emotional states. "You're evolving," he whispered with wonder. "We all are," Veila replied, her gaze drifting to the monitor showing Thera sleeping peacefully. The child's own exoskeleton had begun developing unique patterns, neither Seldorian blue-green nor Carvax crimson, but a stunning violet iridescence all her own. 3 days later, as they prepared the laboratory for their expanded sanctuary program, an unexpected transmission arrived from Eremos 9. Commander Elliot's face appeared on the communication screen, her expression uncharacteristically animated. "We've had a development here you should know about," she said without preamble. "A group of Seldorian females, all previously classified as defective, have requested asylum at our research station." Veila's antennae stiffened in surprise. "How many?" 17 so far, with reports of more preparing to leave the dome. They're calling it the Thera movement. Apparently, word of your departure spread through the exiled communities. Elliot's lips curved in a rare smile. "It seems your defiance has sparked something of a revolution." That evening, as Jupiter rose vast and magnificent on the horizon, Veila sat with Thera on her lap, teaching the child to recognize the cosmic patterns of their new home. The child's unique eyes, wide and curious, absorbed everything with extraordinary intelligence. "Mama," Thera clicked, her small hand touching Veila's face in the precise spot where Seldorian mothers were traditionally marked with ceremonial pigment, a ritual Veila had never expected to experience. "Yes, little one," Veila answered, all 4 of her arms cradling the child in an embrace that defied everything she had been taught about emotional restraint. "Mother is here." From the laboratory doorway, Jallen watched them, the 2 beings who had redefined his understanding of family. Tomorrow they would welcome the first new arrivals to their sanctuary. Tomorrow they would begin building something unprecedented, a community where defective became distinctive, where biological destiny yielded to chosen bonds. But tonight belonged to the 3 of them, the first family of their kind in the galaxy. As the stars wheeled overhead and Europa's ocean churned beneath the ice, Veila finally understood the truth that had eluded her people for generations: motherhood was never about genetic perfection or biological destiny. It was about the capacity to love beyond reason, to protect against all odds, and to see possibility where others saw only deficiency. She had not failed at being Seldorian. She had succeeded at becoming something more.